Welcome to Ready Layer 2 with me, Get.Small. This is a podcast for the founders, innovators, and experimenters building the future of Web3 on Arbitrum. Hey everybody, Get.Small here. Welcome to the Ready Layer 2 podcast. I am super excited to bring to you today Colonel Sanders, Andrew Saunders. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, man, you bet. We're going to dig into your approach to the crypto world. I think it's been really fascinating. You came in to all of this stuff, joining Arbitrum around the time that I was really getting interested in crypto in general and certainly in the Arbitrum space. So I feel like I've been able to watch your crypto journey here through all of that to Hashflow, Hashverse, everything else. And I think there's a ton here that all of the founders that we're trying to serve with this show can learn from. And that's really what I want to take apart. First, for an introduction, I think most of the people already know your background, you're a rock star, all of that stuff. But if you can just give that 1 minute overview of where you came from before you got into all this stuff.
Yeah, sure. Very non-traditional career path. So I actually started my career at a company called CA Creative Artist Agency, where I represented, call it the 1% of celebrity talent, but I was actually building businesses around them. So I was a little bit of the bridge between Hollywood and Silicon Valley, and then also Hollywood and, Madison Avenue, and a lot of very non-traditional kind of experience and learnings there. Then I went to NBC Universal, one of the world's largest media companies, built their kind of in-house ad agency and scaled that. Fun fact, more revenue than two of the networks combined. So that was exciting. And then going back to CA, I had been building Google-backed startup media companies. And so after my contract at NBCU ended, I actually went to one of those companies to be their global head of marketing and strategy, scaled that up quite a bit to about, I think, 300 million monthly active users, which was really exciting. And then Amazon invested in us. And then about 2 weeks later said, we don't typically do this, but we've been looking for someone for 2 years. We didn't think this person existed. We think you're that person. Why don't you come up to headquarters? And so I was the global head of entertainment and culture for Amazon, which basically meant I was doing a lot of kind of future forward advertising. So things like integrated marketing, podcasts, digital marketing. And that was across all products, all services and countries, which is pretty rare for Amazon. I was there for about 3 years, then became the first CMO of Arbitrum, which I'm sure folks are familiar with, Layer 2. And then now I am the CMO of Hashflow, which I'm happy to talk about a little bit more as well.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Oh, that was perfect. And now, you seem like a natural marketer to me. You seem like this is you, this is in your blood. Yeah. Has this always been it, or was there ever another path for you?
Yeah, no, it was always the path. I think I blurred the lines in my career between marketing, business development, strategy, like a lot of different fields. I think just intellectually curious persons. When I find something interesting, I tend to go down the rabbit hole quite a bit. A lot of what I do is self-taught over the years because I've been at the forefront of a lot of different technologies from digital. I was one of the folks that brought celebrities onto Facebook. Influencer marketing, I think I was one of the first to create those. Did some of the first television shows that came from digital, but really blurring the lines. And so I think, again, when you're blurring the lines, a lot of times you have to create the models, or you have to go learn about this model and say to yourself, why can't I pull those apart and restructure them together? So I would say probably a good 80% self-taught, but I think that's just the benefit of maybe being a little bit ahead of the curve. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. That's no surprise then you found your way into crypto then. That seems to be the type of people that are attracted here, no doubt. So let's talk about that. And like I said, right when I was really starting to get heavy into the space is when I remember people were like, oh, this is good news. Arbitrum just hired Amazon's head of whatever to lead marketing. That sounds like a plus, right? And so then I start seeing you pop up on crypto Twitter, and right away the personality that we see today, it started to show itself right then. And very, very playful, very engaging, just got in there. So just talk to us about that, because you came from you did big stuff and you started small and made it big, and then you went into things that were already big and grew them. So you've got a lot of exposure there. But that was all Web 2 world, different mindset, different audience, different everything. So just tell us, what was your thinking coming into this when you landed at Arbitrum and it was time to get out in the world and start doing what you do?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for anyone that has been on my website before, I've worked with pretty much every major brand you can think of, from the Nikes to the Microsofts of the world. And I think, again, looking at the knowledge base, different industries market in different ways. I've also worked with startups, mid-sized companies, large-scale companies, but also working with them in other countries, and marketing on a country level tends to differ. And so I think in my head, there's a little bit of what I call this Bible of best practices for every little thing. or even just hundreds of models that I've tried here or here in different areas. And I think usually my approach to marketing, I hate the word expert. I've always hated it. Whenever I see someone say, I'm a digital marketing expert, I'm like, no, you're not, because a lot of these fields are constantly inventing themselves, reinventing themselves. And I think at the end of the day, you have to continuously be learning, or otherwise you're going to get left behind. You're going to get stuck in old models. And so when I got into crypto, and I can always tell you my crypto origin story, like I was very personally passionate and interested in it. I would say, it's funny, someone asked me the other day, like, what's your personal mission statement, or like, what's your legacy? And it's pretty simple for me. It's, I want to empower everyone other than the 0.01%. I just think that, when you look at everything in this industry, from DeFi to DeSci to artwork, in the traditional sense, they're all tied to these models that are very controlled and very, let's call it, self-serving to the elite. And I think, again, like, we live in the real world. There are real people. And I just don't think where you're born, where you went to school, any of that stuff should really dictate your possibility or potential. So that's a big reason I'm here. But so I got in, and I was like, I got to learn this stuff. And so for me, it always starts with observing, right? So could be things like creating lists of other leaders, or looking at kind of folks driving a lot of engagement and just seeing what they're doing, seeing what's working, seeing what's not working. Test and learn is what we call that at Amazon. But I think very quickly what I realized was, like, there's a lot of similarity between crypto and what I call D2C. So I'm also a VC investor. I've invested in a lot of D2C, direct-to-consumer businesses. And I think, like, the success for a lot of those in the early days was around this notion of, like, building and fostering community, right? You see this way back in the day, funny enough, with surf brands like the Roxys and Quicksilvers of the world, even like the Red Bulls of the world. And so the first thing I said to myself is, okay, this is more about community development, community engagement, than it is what you call force exposure. And easiest way to explain that is, in marketing, there's kind of two different ways to think about it. So you have what's called force exposure. Force exposure is like traditional Web2 marketing, meaning I'm going to force you to watch this 30-second spot on TV. I'm going to force you to see this billboard on the street. I'm going to force you, to listen to this radio ad, right? And then you have what's called inbound marketing, which is something I've been doing for probably close to 20 years, which is really more about putting great content out there, optimizing it for discovery, and then pulling people in. And so very quickly I was like, okay, if I look at this industry, it's community development and it's inbound marketing, right? And then what fuels inbound marketing is content, great content. I've also been a content marketer for close to 20 years. So I'm like, content marketing. So very quickly I started to go, all right, here is the playbook. Here are the strategies. Here are the things I've done in the past that'll probably work here. And then again, and I credit Amazon with this, they really drilled into my head this notion of test and learn. What they do is they give you a very small budget, very limited resources. And they're like, you figure it out, you crack the code, and then we'll scale it up for you in every capacity. And so it was a lot of that. It was like, let me just try a bunch of different tactics in inbound. Let me try a bunch of different tactics in community development, and literally A/B test, and then look at the metrics and see what works. And then I think the other thing, which this is more of like a personal ethos, is I didn't grow up with a lot of money, right? And I've been very lucky. I think I've just been working since I was 12 years old, and very intellectually curious and very driven. And I have parents that are, very supportive of like education and things like that. And I just looked at all this and I was like, I do not want to be a C-suite executive on a high horse. Like, it's not who I am. It never has been. My friends aren't those kinds of people to begin with. So like, I'm a man of the people. And I tweet that sometimes, but I really mean it. And so I think very quickly I started to go, I don't even need to be a CMO. I just need to be a community member that has a voice, and really think about, like, how do I give voices to other community members? How do I build their profiles? Even at Arbitrum, for example, there's community members. Like, I started out, I think, on CT with like 3,000 followers. Now I'm up to 26,000 in a pretty short time. But there's others that I found that had 300 followers that are now up to 15, 20,000. And part of that is I was like, these guys are good people. These guys are here for the right reasons, that's a big thing for me, people that are here for the right reasons. And I was like, I have a platform. This is Comarketing 101. I call it the hip hop model. But I was like, why don't I leverage what I'm building to build them simultaneously? And then long term, I now have friends that still support me with much higher reach and engagement. I still support them, but there's such a like huge co-marketing aspect to this. And I don't have to get into it, but even with Hashflow, if I look at the 5,000 mints we did in a bear market and the close to 1,000 players that are coming, like 90% of what I was doing there was co-marketing. I mean, we didn't spend $1 on paid media. But I think, again, most folks come from this forced exposure, paid media background. And I do think the organic stuff is 100 times harder. And so I guess I would credit like the 20 years of test and learn experience maybe.
Love it. And it is definitely harder with the organic and you're inherently dealing with smaller numbers too, which I think people struggle with.
One thing I'd call out, like that's probably good for founders to hear right now. I think a lot of times, if you look at like where founders come from in this industry, it's like you have a lot of academics, you have a lot of developers, you have some kind of business people. You don't have a lot of marketers, right? But I think like the thing I would say to almost everyone right now is flat is the new up. Because you have to remember, X is screwing around with the platform. The new CEO of X is my old manager, so I know very well what's going on over there. But they're screwing around with the platform. That's impacting engagement. They're also doing bot sweeps, which means your follower count's going to go down. And so the way I look at it, even for my own profile, is I'm like, if I can just maintain my current number, knowing that there's negative forces against it, that is growth, right? And then when we hit a bull market again, that's when I'll turn around and say, all right, what's our new monthly metric? Like, how do we grow that? But I do think flat is the new up right now.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Your weight's staying the same, but you're turning into muscle instead of flab, and the difference is going to play out. Yeah, no
good
doubt.
Analogy. Yeah.
So I love like I think about numbers a lot because like niche in marketing, right, and niche in approach. If you're trying to sell mattresses, you're speaking to everybody, right? And that's why you might listen to a Joe Rogan show or one of those like massive podcasts that have like millions of listeners, and you're going to hear ads for those generic types of things. There's enough ears. Enough people are going to need a mattress, enough people buy a mattress. Yeah. That's not going to work for you. Like you're coming into crypto and in a subset of crypto, right? So you weren't coming into crypto generally or even mainnet. You were coming into L2, which has its own next level of friction to get to. And I love that approach of sitting back and observing first. I think that's like the first call out to any founder who's trying to figure out like what is your marketing platform for your project is get a good picture of who you're trying to serve and then observe them, right? What do they want? What do they need? How they talk to each other and try to fit into that. The other thing I want to call out is you said about the inbound plus community and you tied that back to the Red Bulls of the world and the surf community and things like that. Do you think that those types of markets that tend to have that community, it's because they are small and niche and they're more likely to identify with one another, right? Like Red Bull, I think of immediately like extreme sports. As soon as you said this thing come to mind. They're racing planes, they're, flipping off of stuff, they're doing things. So like those adrenaline junkies are the ones that are going to be part of that community. That makes sense. You can't build a community of all the people who need a mattress. Like that just doesn't make sense. Do you think that's what it is?
You can. It's very like, this is where we start to get into it. Like I've got Amazon data scientists on retainer. I've got my own CRM platform. I'm building my own addressable system. Like you can do all this stuff, but I would say like the amount of marketers I know in my Rolodex, and I know a lot of marketers that actually know how to do this stuff is pretty slim. And usually what you'll find, this is just a tip for founders, is like, when you're building your first marketing team, you have to understand that the difference between like marketing and developers is, and I don't want to discredit developers. I understand there's back-end developers, front-end developers, Solidity developers, but like in general, you can scale up a development team and therefore scale up the throughput, right? Marketing is very different because what you have in marketing is you have very different skill sets and most marketers are very narrowly focused, right? So easiest way to think, like I'll go macro down to micro. So at a macro level, you have B2B marketers, like people that market a business to a business. I've done that before. And then you have B2C marketers, folks that also market a business to consumer, right? So I've crossed both of those. Most marketers have only done one or the other. I've also done what's called B2B2C, which is basically marketing a business to then have customer impact as a halo effect on the back of that. So again, like because I get a lot of companies that reach out going, who should I hire? You have to understand that one, you're probably not going to get someone that has all three. You're probably not going to get someone that has all two. So then you have to figure out like, what do you need, right? So if you're a layer 2 company, you probably want a B2B marketer, right? At least right now. If you're a consumer facing project, like an NFT or something like that, you probably want a consumer facing marketer, right? Even though I think from a business development standpoint, B2B obviously helps you scale faster. Best analogy I can make is you are selling mattresses, right? I'll use your example. It is going to scale your business faster to go do a partnership with Marriott to get those mattresses into every hotel room than it is to try to sell those mattresses direct to consumers like a Casper. It just is, right? So I think that's the first thing. Then you go a step below that and you go, all right, so I now have my leader, my visionary, my strategy person. And then you have to go, but there's a lot of different types of marketing, right? So there's media buying, media planning. You're probably going to need a media person. I do media buying and planning, but again, most CMOs don't. Then you're going to probably need like a content digital strategist, someone that understands content creation, content optimization, algorithms, all that. I do that stuff. Most CMOs don't. Then you're probably going to need like a data person. You're going to need someone that knows how to crunch numbers, use numbers to drive conclusions and assumptions for test and learn optimization. I do that. Most CMOs don't, right? So the long story short, without going on the list, is At a very early age, I basically said to myself, I know I want to be a CMO one day. How do I become the best CMO possible? I understand on a micro level every single thing about marketing, which is not common for marketers. And so for years, the best recruiters in advertising for Whiten and Kennedy and all these big agencies, they wouldn't give me the time of day because they're like, you're a jack of all trades, a specialist of none. And I used to say to them, mark my words, one day you will be calling me, looking for me and more people like me. And they're like, okay, let's stay friends. And sure enough, Andrew and Kennedy, all these companies have called me over the years now saying, want to come in, Chiat Day. They were probably the ones that went the hardest where they're like, forget content guy. Like, how about global head of content for the entire holding company? And I was like, that's an interesting one. And for them, it wasn't even just help our clients do content marketing and evolve. It was like union models and things like that are all changing. How do we crack the code on this to evolve our entire business? And I was like, I know how to do that because I did it in Hollywood. I did it here. So I think, again, like the biggest mistake I see with most projects in the space is they're trying to find a CMO that can do everything. And that's not going to be the case. I think you need to start with, I need a B2B or B2C marketer. Then the question becomes, do you want someone that has background in a similar product? Like I worked with AWS for 3 years. You could argue some similarities with Arbitrum. Maybe you're a ledger and you're building a tech product. Maybe you want a B2C tech marketer, right? But you want to find someone that has maybe some experience in that area. But then you also have to empower them to build a team because you have to understand a one-person marketing team is never going to really help you achieve your goals. Let that person identify what they need to build. So one of the things I usually say is I build modern marketing organizations, which is true. I think this is why I get a lot of phone calls because a traditional marketing organization, not even in Web3, but in Web2 doesn't work anymore, right? And so if you want to build a modern marketing organization, you're looking for very different skill sets from very different types of people and industries. Most people's Rolodexes are very kind of finite in one industry, right? And so I'll give you an example. Like when I was at NBC Universal and we built that agency, which honestly crushed, it's because I had folks coming from ad agencies. I had folks coming from media companies. I had folks coming from media agencies. I had folks coming from publishers because I was like, I need someone to do this. Where do I find the best possible person to do that? I know they're going to lack skill A, B, and C. I'll teach them that stuff, right? And so what I was doing was basically building my own hybrid talent that didn't exist in the market. And even now, like I get calls from pretty big VCs in the industry asking me like, where do we find this or where do we find that? And a lot of times I'm like, I have 2 of those folks in my Rolodex of 40,000 people. Like one of them works for me. The other one you could hire, but they're not crypto native. They don't understand this. So you have to be willing to 1, accept that, and 2, invest in them and build them into what you need. And I think a lot of companies, not even just in crypto, like they just expect these immediate results and they don't understand that's not how it works. Like you got to build it up. It takes time, Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the industry's over the last couple of years has created that culture or that expectation, if you will, is that if you can just churn enough hype, then all that junk's going to happen. And I do think that's starting to die. And it certainly has
I hope
the last couple of months really been bled out. All these NFT projects, for example, just bleeding out. And hopefully we're going to move away from that. But I'm sure there'll be another hype cycle at some point too. But for somebody who
like, I was going to say, I've talked about this before, but it's this notion of like narrative writing, narrative chasing. I hate it. I really do. I'll never do it. The only time I'd ever write a narrative is if I'm building X, Y, or Z. All of a sudden that becomes a narrative because I'm like, I have a tangible product aligned with that narrative. So I'm going to connect it together.
Yeah, you're not just selling a narrative. You're using a narrative to sell value, sell a thing that has value. Right.
Exactly. Like when the AI stuff came out, I can't tell you how many projects all of a sudden were like, we have an AI play. And I'm like, no, you don't. I worked in AI for 3 years at Amazon. I know what's real. I know what's not. This is just BS narrative writing to pump your token. And I look at that stuff as it's not market manipulation. It's narrative manipulation. It's PR manipulation. And at the end of the day, that stuff impacts real people. Right. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be honest. Right. I'm going to hype my stuff as much as I can, but I'm going to do it authentically and transparently. I'm not going to mislead people.
Yeah, no, I'm with you too. So yeah, if you have that value proposition, building the narrative around that, building hype around that, I think that's the game. That's what you want to do. You want to find a way to get the thing into the hands of the people that you're trying to help. And sometimes you got to excite them to do that. Yeah, the 100% fair game there. So as you like coming in and applying all of these tools into the crypto space, one, you're working in a much smaller market now. You said you came in, you observed, looking at stuff. So like the the potential outcomes are very different, right? Of doing well at Arbitrum or doing well at Hashflow, your outcomes are going to be different than doing well at Amazon globally. So as you came in, you observed, you started to try out some different tactics. What were the things that you felt like were worked well? What were the things that were effective, and how did you tell? What were you measuring, or what were you observing as a result to say, all right, that thing's good, I'm going to do more of that. That thing's not so good, I'm going to do less of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, I'll take a step back. So I think like in marketing, we call this TAM, total addressable market. You'll see that as a term in other areas, not just marketing. I think in general that the overall understanding of TAM in crypto is completely wrong. Like, I've had folks give me numbers and assumptions, and I'm like, I don't really trust this stuff. And so I've had at Hashflow, for example, like, one of the benefits of working at Amazon was like I had enormous data teams and under my purview. And so I brought in some Amazon data scientists for Hashflow, and they've been for the past 5 months really diving deep into the market and running analyses and all these things. And it's funny because I remember when I first talked to them, I said, I'm going to give you a list of assumptions that I have, just like gut feeling assumptions. And I'm curious to see once you pull this data, if my assumptions are right. And I would say of those assumptions, about 90% have been correct, right? So I think—
Can you give any examples?
Yeah, so I think I was definitely very early to say, I think Asia is where things are going. Like before the Asia APAC narrative happened, I just started seeing signals, even little things like what time of day was I getting the most engagement on my handle and things like that. And this was still when we were in more bullish vibes than right now. And when I first got to Hashflow, I said to them, I think we need to focus on APAC. I feel like Korea, Japan, these countries are the play. And I love these guys at Hashflow. I genuinely do. Like, they're not only are they like really good humans, but they all come from big tech. They're very empowering of me, very supportive of like test and learn. Like it really is like my future founding team for life, probably.
Nice.
And which is always nice because it's hard to find like the perfect home.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I said to them early on, I was like, listen, I know I'm brand new. I know I'm still onboarding, but I just have this feeling. And I just said to them, it's a gut feeling. Like I'm seeing things, I'm feeling things. It's just a gut feeling. Then like a couple weeks later, so I guess this would have been like back in April of this year, I started to see a couple articles about like Korea and things like that, numbers. I sent those to them. I was like, I think I'm right. Then we started to run some data analyses on the back of like our own metrics. We started to see, again, countries like Korea being number one in terms of site traffic. Then my data science team at Amazon started coming back. And then 2 months later, everyone I talked to from like Pudgy to DGOS, et cetera, we're focused on APAC. And so I was like, I think that was a good moment of, I've been doing this for a long time. I do trust my gut and intuition quite a bit.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like over the span of 4 months, like the data proved that I was correct. And so I think even with Hashflow, like looking at the launch of Hashverse, when I first got there, there was no team-based competition. It was going to be a game where traders come in, trade against each other. And I was like, I feel like we should make this community-based. And I feel like we should create a whole new mechanism and system and all this stuff. And to be honest with you, that's probably why the launch got delayed. I'm probably the reason, right? Because I basically came in and was like, here's 50 things I want to change. And what was cool was I was brand new. The founders were like, we trust this guy, listen to him. Let's go do this stuff. It's going to delay our launch. But honestly, when I look at 5,000 characters minted in a bear market, close to 1,000 active traders daily on the platform, the assumptions were right. And that's part of why I love this place, is like they just trust me in a way that most other companies don't. So I think that's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Going back to the question, I think the early on stuff, there's a couple of things I noticed. I think the co-marketing thing is important. I think working with projects, I'll give you a great example of what I don't like. So I go from a blockchain, a big old infrastructure company with hundreds of partners built on top of it. And what I used to say to projects when I first met them is and I meant it, was like, I just want to clarify for you guys, I'm not the CMO of Arbitrum. I'm the CMO of the Arbitrum ecosystem. And they would be like, what? And I was like, you don't understand. If you guys succeed, if you guys grow, if you guys scale, that's just going to trickle down and benefit me, right? Why do I want to market AWS? I'm not the bright, sexy object. You are, right? And you see this with Friend Tech on Base right now and things like that. And what I had been doing at Arbitrum was building, again, with my background, like 360 co-marketing and media packages. It was like, here's all the things that we can do for your project. And it wasn't as much about like a BD play to get them to build on us versus someone else. It was really more about, I want to help you grow. I want you to be successful. I know you don't have a CMO or even like maybe someone with this kind of experience, but like your success is my success. And I think that was like a big thing. And I still get that from project founders that I used to work with. I miss you. I miss that.
Sure.
But in comparison, I get to Hashflow, and I'll give a shout out to Hunter and Eli, who used to work for me at Arbitrum. But like, but those guys, I love those guys. But if I reach out to those guys and say, like, maybe I'll leak a little alpha on here. Hey, I see you're doing this thing. Like, you should bring me in. Let's get involved. I think there's a play here. Usually they're pretty responsive and supportive because they're like, he knows what he's doing. This is going to benefit him. This is going to benefit us.
Right.
In contrast, what I've seen is I've had chains like the first or second week on the job at Hashflow reaching out to me and going, how do we get more of our traders on your platform? And I'm like, I'll tell you how, by you marketing us to your gigantic community. So for me, it's like, you just have to understand where you sit in the playing field. If you are this massive company with massive audiences and massive resources, your goal should be to grow the projects building on you. If you're a smaller company, your goal should be, again, to grow your DAUs, grow your volume, whatever your metrics are. But the people you're building on top of should be supporting you, not the other way around. And when chains reach out to me with that MO, it turns me off. It just makes it feel like this is all about you, not me. And my success is your success. You're just approaching this completely wrong.
Yeah, because end user doesn't really care about the chain, doesn't care about the technology. They care about the thing, whatever.
They care about the gas fees. They care about the transaction speed. They care about token availability, all those things. And
in pursuit of the app or in pursuit of platform, whatever it is that they're trying to do to get value from.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example of this. When I first got to Arbitrum, I was like, there really isn't an Arbitrum community. There's a treasure community, right? And I joined Treasure. I think I probably own, I'm not going to say I own the most Treasure NFTs, but I definitely own like every collection in Treasure, which I like. I like Treasure. But over time, I think what happened was like I became an active member of the Treasure community. And then I think the Treasure community became an active Arbitrum community. So now not just a Treasure community, but they're both, right? And even with Hashverse right now, what you're seeing, shout out to Lost Donkey, shout out to Realm, shout out to Blockmates, all these guys, is these are all projects that have been able to build like very active communities. And my goal is, one, can I incentivize and reward these communities and actually help them grow, right? Because that's the whole MO with the reward system. And two, can I bring these communities together? And I'm already seeing it. The floor on Donkey's pump, the floor on Realm pump. New people are discovering them because we're promoting them, right? I'm seeing communities that come together. I'm seeing as much banter as there is between Blockmates and Donkeys. See one of the founders of Blockmates yesterday bought a Lost Donkey, right?
Yeah, I saw that.
This is good for everybody. And so my hope here is that like, I don't want to steal people from their communities. Like that should never be your goal as a founder. Like maybe if you're trying to steal from another chain, that's different. But for me, it's more like, I love these communities. I want to help these communities grow. I want to help these communities thrive. I want to bring these communities of like-minded people together that are probably disconnected. And then by doing that and providing value by, for example, Daily Decks or teaching people how to trade, maybe their love for that community gets shared with us. And now they're a member of both communities, you know?
Yep. Yeah. No, I mean, the Blockmates guy buying the dunk yesterday is a great example of that. And the banter between the groups has been hilarious, but it's like, it has definitely brought people together.
We're smart marketers, I'll tell you, because I'm really good friends with both of the founders and stuff of those communities. But shout out to Lambo, like donkeys get it. Like early on, I met Lambo and I was like, this is just a really hungry, good human being that wants to improve his life and do something he's passionate about. And so he's an example of someone I took under my wing early on and was like, let me help you. I was like, follow the playbook, look at what I'm doing, copy it. And then he has really just thrived and started to do his own stuff and he's really succeeding. Yep. And then on the Blockmate side, I've built media companies before. I'm really good friends with the founders there. I'll jump on with them and do free strategy sessions like, here's how to scale audience acquisition, media pricing, all those things. Because the way I look at it is if the real ones and the good ones can thrive and succeed, that's just going to move the entire industry forward. Totally. But you better believe I also want the bad ones to collapse.
Yeah, you got to help the bad guys collapse, no doubt. And if you could help the good ones win, that's going to hopefully expedite that. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that front. So let's dig into this Hashverse a little bit more right now since we're really hanging out here. Tell us about that. So you joined Hashflow, coming on as their first CMO. Hashverse concept was already well underway at that point, right? Yes. Like that was, so you're coming in. Describe the situation when you dropped in and what was your job? What was your immediate goal or task set in front of you?
Yeah, for sure. I'll take a step back. To my delight, after Arbitrum, I had 25 companies reach out in the first week, including some very large competitors and blockchains. And I said to myself, listen, as a marketer, I like B2C better than B2B. It's more fun. It's more engaging, right? right? And so as enticing as it would have been to go to another layer 2 or an alt 1, it was going to be more of the same for me and not really where I wanted to be long term. And so I have a whole slew of variables I look at because, again, I'm also a VC, right? So I look at the founding team, I look at their backgrounds, I look at their track records, I look at the VCs. I often talk to the VCs, understand kind of their sentiment. I look at community, I look at social, I look at funding, I look at a lot of things. And I think for me, like the biggest thing was I wanted to find a founding team that I really could vibe with, that like really understood me and also was going to be very like empowering and supportive, because I've been doing this for 20 years. Like I need people that just let me do my thing, right?
Yep.
And so funny enough, they were one of the 25 that had reached out, and I was talking to Dragonfly, who's probably one of my favorite native VCs. Those guys are awesome. The other one I really like is Electric, which is former Dragonfly, no surprise. And I was on with the talent team there. They were like, where do you want to go? We'll open up the portfolio for you, like anywhere you want to go. And I just told them, I'm like, here's what I'm looking for. It's very specific. And I gave them the list of bullets. And they're like, there's 3 companies in crypto that check all those boxes. And I go, I'm very well aware. And then I was like, who's your number 1 pick? And they're like, Hashflow. And they didn't know that I had already been talking to Hashflow and they had reached out. And so that was the impetus for my turning around and saying yes. And so with Hashflow, the way I looked at it was they have incredible investors, many are which crypto native VCs. And I think what people don't understand, because I've worked with all the non-native VCs over the years, is the native VCs bring tremendous value, right? Like they're more likely, I think, to hold on an unlock. I think they understand the long game. I think they're in it for the long game. I think they're more technologically savvy. So it's not uncommon that these folks have developers in-house and they're developing their own things. But I just find, again, that strategic value with the natives typically is higher than the non-natives. And I think I saw the investor pool. I was like, this is a very good investor pool. Then I met all the founders and I was like, okay, CEO, former NASA, former Germany version of NASA, Stanford PhD deferral. I'm like, okay, this guy's really smart. Like he knows
pretty high end, yeah.
Pretty high end. And I also I really liked him on a personal level. Like we talked about things like wellness and surfing, which are like 2 areas I like. And I was like, okay, I could hang out with this guy like in real life. And sure enough, he's become like a very good personal friend. Then I met the COO who came from management consulting, who also had a little bit of marketing experience in the NBA. So similar to what I did at Amazon. And then for management consulting, he'd been working with the Goldman Sachs of the world. So I was like, okay, I like management consultants. I think they're super smart, strategic. They understand P&L, like all these things. This guy's done it in finance. He also understands me, understands my world. And then the more we discussed, the more I realized this guy is literally just like me. And we probably would have been best friends like in childhood. Like he grew up in Queens. I grew up outside the city. We're into like literally all the same things, right? And sure enough, he's become like a very good personal friend, right? So check. General counsel. Most companies I find don't have in-house general counsel, which I think is a huge mistake. We do, but he comes from Google and he worked in Google AI. I come from Amazon. I worked in Amazon AI. And so instantly it was like, I know exactly who you are. I worked with your counterpart for 3 years. You're super smart. You get it. And then he had already had a personal relationship with the COO for years, and the CEO and COO had a relationship. So there was already that like working relationship. And so I think like every time I met someone, I just continued to say, this feels right. And then I met our CTO who came from Airbnb. And then before that was at Meta, really good developer. So again, someone that's worked in big tech for years in startups. I know the difference between a decent developer, a good developer, and what I call a wonderkin. This guy is a wonderkin. He just will sit there with a giant monitor and just build something in an hour. Like I've never seen anyone like him. And then, so I was like, okay, C-suite tracks. Then I looked at like the next level down and all that. And I was like, wow, all these developers come from big tech. Like they get it. Marketing team was obviously brand new at the time. But in general, it's like the talent was really good. And I think that's the key to a lot of successful businesses that people don't understand is like great talent attracts great talent. And I think talent retention is also really important. And I did talk to them quite a bit about just like, what's your stance on talent and performance and all these things. And my takeaway was like, these are really good guys that like want people to win, that want to hire the best, that want to like actually empower and grow their people, which is not common, not even in Web3, but in the industry. So
sometimes surface level, you'll get that kind of talk, but you don't get it in the actions.
Very self-serving typically. But and I asked all of them, like, why are you in crypto? I wanted to hear like the honest answers, right? And so I think, again, like it just checked all the boxes for me. And then I dug into the product more. I do trade. Full transparency, there's like a bunch of limitations that I identified. And before I even started, I was like, let me walk you through every change I would make. And then they
Yeah.
literally smiled and they're like, welcome to our roadmap. And I was like, all right, we're on the same page here. So
Nice.
I'm very bullish on us long term. But I think that was the Hashflow story. And I think again, like I also, as an investor, I understand the sectors. And so when I was looking at leaving Amazon and coming in, I was like, what do I believe will be here, not just today, but also tomorrow? Infrastructure, right? So
Right.
even though marketing wise, infrastructure isn't really my favorite thing, I was like, this is a good starting place. This is a good place that's going to be around for a while. And then I also knew that by working at a blockchain, I'd be exposed to an entire ecosystem of projects. So maybe I find my next home, or maybe I start to get a much better understanding of all the different sectors. And after Arbitrum, I think I looked at it as what's still stable. I think infrastructure is obviously still stable. I think NFT space is rocky, even though I did talk to some pretty big projects. I think DeFi, as much as people think it's unstable, I think it's actually quite stable. I think it's just certain projects. And then obviously you have things like AI coming out and all that. And so I really just figured out like what's a vertical I believe in, who are founders I believe in, who are VCs I believe in, check all the right boxes. And here I am at Hashflow. Yeah.
Yeah, right on. It's hard to find that match. A founder trying to find the right marketing person. This is the same thing in reverse, right? There's three companies in existence that could meet the profile that you described.
Yeah.
And you found one. So I'm curious in all of this, was there ever a chance of you going outside of crypto?
No, I'm all in. I think I still get a lot of Web2 companies that reach out, like big tech companies. TikTok reached out. They're like, we need a very high level executive at TikTok. I definitely get a lot of media companies because they're like, we know you understand how to scale a media company. A lot of the companies I invest in turn around and go, do you want to work here? And some of them are great brands. But I think this is going to be a weird thing to say, but like a lot of times when you're a high level, not even just CMO, but like C-suite executive, a lot of times you end your career in charity, which I know is a weird thing to say because this is like a financial industry. But as weird as it sounds, I do feel like every day I'm actually making the world a better place because, again, of my like personal mission and ethos. And if I can disrupt the traditional models and the traditional system and literally break those things and, again, build them in a way that like everyone other than the 0.1% benefits, like weirdly enough, there's a little bit of a charity angle there. So I look at this as I'm not just passionate about it and I enjoy it. I also genuinely feel like what I'm doing can make this world a better place, which once you're a dad, I'm in my 40s, like you start to care about that stuff a lot more. Like funny enough, the other sector I almost went into outside of crypto was climate tech, right? Like I used to work in climate tech and all that stuff back in the day. But I do believe in that stuff as well. And I think I'm here for a while.
Yeah, nice. I can relate to all that. In my 40s, have kids. I've spent almost my entire career in healthcare exactly for that reason. It's because like here, when I do things, it might actually help someone's grandma or might make somebody's life a little bit better and more comfortable. And that's always appealed to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think health tech's a great field. I think it's actually funny because a lot of people, like when I went to Amazon, a lot of people were like very surprised. They're like, you don't seem like the kind of person that would want to work there. And the truth was I didn't. And basically what happened was the CMO at the time brought me up, and candidly, she's amazing. She's awesome. And I met a lot of people that I didn't expect to meet just in terms of the types of people. And then what finally clicked with me, because when I first started, I was working in AI, was I have a very close family member that has an illness. And I realized that AI technology could greatly improve his life from an accessibility standpoint. And so when I first got in to Amazon, I was working on Alexa. As much as we were trying to sell Alexa devices and all that, there were videos that I would see online of a blind person, like how they would grocery shop pre-Alexa, how they would grocery shop post-Alexa. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me going. Or even in crypto, after the airdrop, I got DMs from folks like, I bought my first car, I bought my first mattress, awesome. I paid off my college tuition loan. That's the stuff I care about. That's the stuff that keeps me in the industry. It's not like
it's not helping rich guys get a little richer. It's like helping everybody get something. I'm totally with you. I think that's awesome. I want to dig in a little bit more on the Hash first side, but I want to, one thing I don't want to miss. It was subtle, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but you made the point about you had a hunch about Asia and you trust your gut. And one thing I want to point out, because I think a lot of times people want to trust their gut but not verify it. And I want to make sure nobody missed the part about you going back to your data science team at Amazon and like you trusted your gut, but you verified it. And I think that's super important for a founder to hear is you don't just blindly trust, right? So you just touch on it a little bit, like how you approach that stuff when you feel something like, I got a good hunch here.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
often do you just let it fly, and how often do you say, here's the plan of how I'm going to verify that hunch?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like I'm a very open-minded person. Like I personally believe that like good ideas come from anywhere. So if someone on my eng team brings me a marketing idea, I don't go, man,
Mhm.
you're an engineer. What do you know about marketing? I'm like, tell me, explain.
Sure.
Because a lot of times what'll happen is I'll hear something and then I'll go, it's not right, but there's something in here. And if I twist this and turn that and piece this here, like it
Yep.
turns into something like very meaningful, right? So I think that's important, is like just that notion of good ideas come from anywhere. But I think for me, it's like I've worked in so many different sectors in so many different countries at so many different budget levels that like I've seen it all. Super Bowl ad, check, all that stuff, right? So I think a lot of times when I have an intuition, it's already a little bit informed by like my own historic knowledge base, which is pretty
Sure.
large,
Yep.
right? I do trust myself a lot. And that actually was a
Yep.
thing at Amazon. Like we had these things called leadership principles, but one of them, and they hire for the principles, was like, is often right, right? So they actually tested me for, God, it was like 8 hours straight. And one of those tests was like, are you right?
The test is often right. I love
Yeah,
that.
so the way it works, it's like fun fact for anyone that ever wants to work at Amazon. So I think there's now 10, but there's 8 leadership principles. And I didn't even prep for my interview, which is hilarious because most people spend like days prepping. But it was like, it's 8 hours, or at least back then it was 8 hours, 1 hour per question, or excuse me, 1 hour per leadership principle. And then basically you have to provide like actual tangible examples of like, here was the situation, here was the task, here was the action I took, and then here were the tangible results, like nothing superficial, like numbers, right? And so one of those hours was like, are you right? And it was basically, I had to walk them through, I think, 2 or 3 examples of situations in my career where I had an assumption, there was a task, I took an action, there were results, and the results were really good. And so even
Mhm.
things like Hashflow, for example, is a good example of that. If I wanted to go to Amazon, I'd walk them through like, my assumption was community based, blah, 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 all these things,
Yep.
as a result, 5,000 mints in a bear market, right? Like that's
Yep.
kind of how it operates, right? So definitely lean into the knowledge base. But I think aside from that, like I I value and respect research and data people way more than most people do, right? And I won't get
Okay.
into like why I do, but I do. And so even when I was at Amazon, like I cracked the code on integrated marketing, like it's now measurable at Amazon. It never was. I helped crack the code on podcast marketing. It was never measurable at Amazon. Now it is. Sadly, I don't have access to my old dashboards, which I wish I did. But anyways, like the way I cracked that code was I was working with data scientists in places like India, and I understand them and I understand their world. And one, I could communicate very clearly with them, but two, I also really respected them and respected their opinions, and also really celebrated them and their wins, which is not a common thing at most companies. So when I get here, like there's different types of data. There's first party data. You can look at your site traffic. You can look at all these different metrics on your own platforms and channels, even your social channels. You can look at those metrics. Then you've got third party data. There could be overall market data and things like that, which you can just look at that stuff, or you can do what's called data matching. Let me take my first party data, third party data, match it together, see where there's, commonalities. One thing that most folks forget is you also have what's called qual and quant, right? So there's certain things that are very numbers driven, right? And then there's other things that are more like focus group driven, right? Fun fact, I have a focus group for Hashflow of very high level community members, and these folks beta test the game multiple times, right? And some of these guys are founders, some of these guys are developers, some of these guys are just very active community members. But like when we beta tested the game with them, there were, I would say, a couple folks that sent through 3 pages of notes, right?
Oh, nice.
And usually what happens is you get that stuff and you go, cool. No, like I took all those notes, compiled them into a document, including if I saw the same comment multiple times. And then I
Right.
gave that to the Eng team, and they executed like 99.9% of that stuff. So shout out to the community, because I think part of why Hashflow is so great is like all that community feedback got integrated into the actual game.
Yeah,
Right?
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
the last thing you want to do is request feedback and then not integrate all of that stuff too. That's
Like,
a real
why
quick way to
bother?
lose
It's like, why
attention,
waste your
right?
time? Yeah. So even on the Asia side, like I'll give you my example of the focus group stuff. Like I did an event with Kudasai, which is a pretty like prolific trading community in Japan. I really like those guys quite a bit. And when I did the event, like they were amazing, by the way, like great team. Like they just, the whole event, they're like, we want to introduce you to everybody here one by one, like build the relationship
Nice.
Apex style, which is great. And I asked all these people questions. I'm like, I'm curious about this and I'm curious about that. And I asked them things like, how do you think crypto is being seen in your country? What do you think the government's stance is? What companies are you seeing enter the space? Stuff like that. And so I walked away from that event with, again, a whole new research base of takeaways from folks deep in the industry in Japan, right? And so I'm taking that plus my first party data, plus third party data, plus my Amazon data scientist research, and I'm matching it all together. And sure enough, it's saying to me, yeah, your assumptions are right.
Yeah, right on. No, it's a very thorough approach. That's why I wanted to address it, because a lot of times people will say, I'm just going with my gut, and they'll just roll with it. Sometimes that could be the right thing to do, but certainly I would be less trusting of yourself if you're very early on in your career and you haven't done a lot of stuff, because that's the first thing that you said, is you've done all this.
I would say one thing to that, because I think this is like a big misconception in general. I think in Web 2, there's this overall mentality of, if you're young, you're not experienced and you don't know, right? If you're my age and you're in your 40s and you've seen it all and you've done it all, like you're the expert, right? And what I mean by that is, I look at my team, right? I've got a chief DGen on my team, right? And I'll say to him like, hey, I have this idea for social content or campaign or whatever. And I told them all when I first got there, I was like, I want you guys to say no to me. I want you guys to push back. I don't need yes men on my team. And shout out to Alan Carroll. Alan will be like, I don't like that. And I'll say, why? Like, why don't you like it? And then he'll say, here's why. And then I'll think about it for a little bit. And then I'll call him back and I'll be like, you know what, man, you're right. I don't like it anymore either. Because again, I'm approaching it from a mindset of X, Y, and Z. You're approaching it from a mindset of ABC. And I actually think the ABC approach is correct. Or another good example, because I'm a high level guy now, yeah, I live in the trenches like way more than most CMOs, but I can't live in every trench. I don't have time for it. So
yeah, things change quickly.
Yeah, things change really quickly. So when it comes to things like content and social, like I've got a growth marketer, digital marketer on my team. I've got a content marketer who also comes from Amazon on my team. And I'll say to them, I think we should do this on this platform. And then they'll come back to me and say, I don't think we should. And I'll say, why? And they're like, based on the algorithmic change of X, Y, and Z, and based off of blah, 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 like, here's my take. And then again, like I like to think about things. I'm like, great, thanks for all the information. Let me just go digest it for a little bit. I'll think about it. I'll come back. I'll be like, you're right. Or a lot of times I'll say to them, I don't know who's right, but I'm going to empower you to test your assumption instead of mine, because you're closer to the sun on that than I am, right?
Yeah.
And then a month later, we look at the numbers and they were right. Or we look at the numbers and they were wrong. And then I don't go, I was right, you were wrong. I go, now let's try my way. And by the way, my way might not work either. And then we've got to figure out option C. So I think the test and learn is important, but I also think I also think don't always just look at seniority, because I'll be honest with you, especially in this industry, there's a lot of founders that have no experience in consumer businesses, no experience in Web 2 tech companies. And so I think they oftentimes, just out of maybe ego or previous success, are like, here's what I think and I'm right. And I don't agree with that. And again, like you have to just, I think in general as a founder, you have to be really open-minded. You have to, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. 2, surround yourself with people that are much smarter than you in other areas that you're not smart in. And 3, you've got to trust them, or at least give them the ability to test and learn stuff before you say, I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah, right on. No, I'm totally with you. And honestly, I was splitting hairs on the amount of verification you should do. And I'm just going to leave that aside. And I think the main point I'm trying to make, and what I keep hearing from you over and over again, is trust but verify. You trust yourself, figure out how you're going to verify it, figure out how you're going to test it. If you can't verify it, how are you going to test it? How are you going to get results? Good ideas come from everywhere. Test them, verify them, etc. And that's really the point. The other thing was nuance that I could just let go.
And
so
the other
that's
thing I would
awesome.
add to that is, I wouldn't even know if I'd go as far as to say verify, because you have to also remember like where you're at in the cycle. So in a bear market, I might test and look for signals to support, I might have an assumption and then look for signals to support my assumption, but I might not see the verification until I get to a bear market. And also the data in a bear and a bull are going to be totally different. So you also have to understand that like, you're like great example with my research scientist from Amazon, or data scientist from Amazon, I'm getting great segmentation data and things like that right now, right? But I am very well aware that may be completely different when we hit a bull market. So I'll probably replicate exactly what I did again. And then for the next 4 years, I now have the bull market data and the bear market data, and I'm constantly swapping between that based on the cycle that we're in. Yeah.
So we talked a bit about the Hashverse already and bringing the communities together and all of this. As I'm sitting here talking to you and listening to your strategies, the way you think about this, obviously, if you want to build a community, what's easier than taking a bunch of communities and bringing them together rather than starting from scratch? How much of your approach here was that? Am I off base on that, or is that part of the thinking?
No, that was definitely part of the strategy. I think there's a couple of things I would say. One, I was already an authentic member of these communities, right? I was already a member of Lost Donkeys. I was already a member of the Blockmates family. I was already a Realmer, right? I'm not this like random project that's just all of a sudden reaching out and it's clearly like a self-serving ask, right? It was more like, oh, that's the guy that helped us for the past X amount of months build. We like him. He's helped us. We know he's here for the right reasons at a macro level. And what I said to them very transparently on the phone when I reached out to all of them, directly, because I knew all these founders, is listen, let me walk you through what I'm doing, or what we're doing, I should say. Let me walk you through why I think this is good for you. And I was honest about it. It wasn't self-serving. I'll give you the example. We'll use donkeys because they're doing really well. So I said to Noodle and Lambo, I said, let's talk about this. Number one, if you guys are a part of the Hashverse, you are now contextually relevant to Hashflow and Hashverse and me. What does that mean? It means my handle with 26,000 followers can amplify your stuff. It means Hashflow with 100 and I think we're like 187,000 followers can amplify your stuff. It means our new Hashverse account, which at the time was 0, I think we just broke 10,000, can amplify your stuff. So from a media perspective, this is really good free marketing for you guys. And it's proved to be true. We've seen the full pump. We've seen lots of community members, like all that stuff, right? Number two, I think that what the Hashverse will do is add a new utility to your NFT, right? And what I meant by that was when you onboard into the Hashverse, you can join allegiances. There are benefits in being in different allegiances. I would say, like, if you're in Lost Donkeys, you're probably less likely to get attacked by someone. You're also, and if you land in top 3 on the leaderboard, there's tangible benefits to that, both for them and for you. The game's going to get bigger and better. You're going to earn some rewards, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I said, so by being in the Hashverse, there's now this added utility of being able to join the Hashverse allegiance, which again might be a reason someone buys one. And I've seen this happen. I've seen players in the Hashverse, because most folks start in what's called the Hash Force, which is like the inclusive, anyone can join the team.
One, yeah.
And then all of a sudden they're like, man, these guys are just so fun and such degens, and I like what they're doing, and I'm bullish on them. And so now I want to be in that allegiance. And you can swap allegiances once per season. We didn't want to make it too much because this isn't about swapping. This is about like loyalty and community building. And so I was like, I've seen it. I've seen people buy donkeys because they want to be able to join that team, and that's good for their project. And then other things, like we have our own media platforms. I won't talk about like the future of those platforms, but we just had an episode of our weekly podcast. We brought on Blockmates, we brought on Lost Donkeys, we brought on Realm. That's great marketing and awareness to them, right? Comarketing, community building on both sides, right? I explained all that to them. And then the other thing that I said to them is I said, listen, you guys know who I am. I'm not going to tell you what the prize is going to be. I'm not going to tell you how it's structured, but you know who I am.
You are
person,
very,
right?
you're
and
very
you know that I
sneaky and
probably
surprising.
play a very large role in figuring out like how these rewards and incentives are going to be handed out, right? And so I said to Noodle and Lambo, because they're very good friends even outside of crypto, I said, I know how much 6 figures would mean to you guys in terms of moving that project forward. And I know right now you have 2 options. You can go get a grant from someone. And the problem with grants, in my opinion, is either one, you might be getting a grant purely to get a grant, you're multi-chaining or something like that, you're not bullish on the future, and therefore, as a result, you're wasting your time building something that is not going to exist in the future, and hopefully you're still getting some money left over from it. The other type of grant that I've seen is, projects or blockchains where they give you a grant, but then there's like these pretty egregious performance metrics attached to it. And so there, the challenge becomes, okay, you get the grant, but now you've got to do all these things that are self-serving to who you got it from. And that might, as a result, derail your focus or your ability to do what you want to do, right? And so I said to them, I said, listen, we're gonna have these allegiance-based rewards throughout the season that could end up being equivalent to 2x what you get from a grant, with literally no strings attached, right? So I do think donkeys are smart, and I do think the reason they're so aggressive is because they understand that. And they're like, if we can win this thing or even be second or third, we could basically get a grant with no strings attached that effectively just enables us to build what we want to do and do what we want to do. So those were like the big things I think I talked about with most folks. But I think very quickly everyone was like, this is a great opportunity. Of all the teams I talked to, very few said no. There was like one that said no, but I think understandably there are teams where they want to see it first. They want to see the numbers and things like that. I said to them, totally fair. Like I support your decision, but my track record, this thing's probably going to be successful. So I think you're missing out. And I do think some of them are probably looking at this going, man, we really missed out. Anyways, yeah.
So I love this approach, and I've been participating too. So I'm in the Donkey Allegiance. I'm assuming at some point you'll be in the Donkey Allegiance, right? Yes. Yeah, probably.
Well, I'll answer that question. So real quick, because I said it and I mean it, I'm a man of the people. So my first allegiance, I put it up for a community vote. Blockmates won. I think most people know because I've tweeted this. I'm going to do another vote because I can switch allegiances once. I'm not going to do it. Right. Yeah, I'm not going to do it battle 2 because again, the season is pretty long. What I'll probably do is either do it like halfway through the battle or 3/4 through the battle. And it's going to be a community vote again, right? And so it's really, again, this notion of like power of the community. So listen, those guys are very vocal and very active. So I think they've got a good chance of winning the vote this time.
It's a noisy bunch for sure. But that's what I'm saying though. It was already an active community. Lambo does an awesome job. Noodle's an awesome dude. They're a good team. They're fun to hang out with. Yes. And everything happening around them is fun. So there was already.
And also, I would say, just to again pat those guys in the back, I've worked with, God, at this point, 600-700 founders. Like Noodle is genuinely one of the nicest, like best people in this space.
Yeah,
like
agreed.
He's here for the right reasons. He's a good quality human. So that's someone where I'm always going to help him as long as I'm in this industry, because those are the kinds of people you want to help.
Yeah, right on. Totally agree. And this just gave that community something else to do together. And it's just fun, right? Like I've had a good time with it. It'd be awesome if we end up winning. I feel bad going against my realm buddies. I'm a big realmer myself, but it's fun, and I have fun.
I will say those guys are scheming behind the scenes because Max is a very Max is a very good IRL friend. I love Jonah. Jonah's great people, but the teams all do tell me what they're doing, and I'm like, those guys are strategic.
Yeah, no, I won't be surprised if Realm does something out of the blue.
I wouldn't be surprised either.
There's some smart folks working on there. Yeah, Max. I had Max on the show here a while back. Really good dude. And hearing him and Lambo go back and forth was great. I think, what do you call him? Poverty McGee on your there's been some really good stuff. So
I wouldn't mess with Lambo IRL. That's all I would say.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. But anyway, it's been fun. I think it's been good for the community, even if they, like, my point was this, is if someone's participating, if they win and they get resources for the project, amazing. But if they don't, they just had a whole bunch of fun with the community, re-engaged people, brought new people in, sold stuff, floor price up. So it's awesome. And it fits along the lines of everything you've been talking about, which is don't go and market to people to sell them stuff. No. I'm here to sell you my thing. Go there and say, how can we do this thing together? How can we do this in a 100%. Way that helps me achieve what I'm trying to achieve, helps you achieve what you're trying to achieve, and we just have a damn good time doing it together.
Yes.
How do we do that? And that's the approach here, and I've heard it throughout the interview. So I think it's a fantastic approach for anybody who's trying to do this, to think that way. Give stuff, be helpful, bring value to the community. Don't try to manipulate people. Don't try to get them to do stuff for you, et cetera, et cetera. It's a mindset shift, but a really important one.
And I'll tie it back even to kind of Amazon. So like when I was at Amazon, I was like, the joke at Amazon was I was Alexa's agent, like Mr. Alexa. My Alexa just went off. But I worked in the 3P space, right? So we worked with the Lamborghinis of the world, all these other companies. Shout out to Lambo. And when we were structuring most of those partnerships are very give and take, right? And we're Amazon, we've got massive media dollars, we've got a website with insane traffic, all these things, right? And then they have maybe broadcast ads, billboards, things like that. But I think even with those partnerships and the folks that I worked at on the Alexa team that kind of led those efforts, a lot of times it was more, in my opinion, it was more like, okay, let me map out like all the value that I can create for them before we even ask for what we want. And I do think a lot of times when we approach those companies, again, knowing we were the blockchain, we were the massive company, it was like, here's everything we're going to do for you. And by the way, like maybe we can get integrated into your TV spot. And by the way, maybe we'll share in the costs of that TV spot. That was something we did pretty frequently because again, like that helped us, but it also like majorly helped them. And so I think that's my takeaway with co-marketing is like, when you approach a project, you do want to approach it almost from the standpoint of like, how do I drive 2 to 3x the value for them to the X that I'm going to drive for myself? And I don't think people think that way. I think they usually think the opposite.
Yeah. I tend to agree in my experience, and I very much enjoy working with people who think this way, what you're describing, than the other. Honestly, I'd rather just not work with them at all. Yeah. So awesome. So as we're wrapping up here, this show is for the founders, right? And I want to, all the stuff you described, I think really helpful to somebody who has some funding and starting to scale and things like that. But I also want to make sure that before we wrap up here, we just give some nuggets to the small teams, like the individuals that are trying to launch something, couple co-founders. They can't go hire a CMO, let alone target a B2B or B2C, all that good stuff for later. But for right now, like I want to, if we could pull out a few tidbits, as someone who dove into CT and into this world and started marketing, what would be your advice to that founder who's listening that's like, shit, I can't do all that stuff, but I got to do something? Where should they start? Where should they focus their limited energies and resources?
Yeah, it's funny because I do a lot of, again, like every week, I probably do 2 or 3 calls with founders or community members or things, just honestly out of the goodness of my heart. I just want to help people. I want to help the space grow, right? And I think karma's real. It pays off. It really does.
Yeah.
But I think this is a pretty common call that I get from founders. It usually is, would you consider being our CMO? I'm like, no, I'm very happy. Then it pivots into, would you be an advisor? Maybe. Like I advise a couple projects, again, not for money, like for different reasons usually. But I think there's a couple big things that I typically say over and over again. The first one is you get what you pay for. And what I mean by that is, at a CMO level, there is what I would call like a big tech salary, like whether the Amazons of the world pay. There's a startup salary, what do most startups pay? But in general, like you're going to get what you pay for, right? And shout out to Hashflow. I think they understood that, right? So they didn't cringe at any point in time. If anything, they're like, we're the guy, we want you, and we're going to do what it takes to get you because we know the exponential value that we're going to get on the back of that, right? And it's going to come back to us like tenfold. So shout out to them for being smart. There were definitely other projects that understood that too. There were other projects where it was like they either had a healthy budget or they were willing to go up, but they were like, we understand what it takes to get best-in-class talent. But I think that's not just a CMO level thing. I think it's across the board. And what I mean by that is I have, again, on my team, probably one of the best content marketers, not just in crypto, but like in the world. She's not cheap. I paid her what she wanted to get paid because I was like, that's what it's going to take to get great talent. And I do think, again, like great talent builds great businesses. What I see happen in this space quite a bit is 2 things. I see folks take this mentality of either, let me get the best I can get for this budget. And I think sometimes they're doing themselves a disservice because it's like, if you just went a little higher, you might get 2 or 3x the value out of that role, right? That's one. The other thing which I hate on a personal level is this notion of in-market rates. And I'll give you an example. So like it is very common, not even just in crypto, but in startups, for people to go, okay, I need to hire a community manager, right? And the cost of a community manager, a good community manager in the US is $90,000. I can get a great community manager in Brazil for $50,000 or Portugal for $50,000. And I don't like that for 2 reasons. One, I don't disagree. Yeah, you can go find like comparable talent in other markets for less money, but there's 2 things that I think about. Again, this is very like Web3 crypto. When I think about the ethos of Web3, and I think about, again, my own personal belief of it shouldn't matter where you're from, it shouldn't matter these things. I pay the same rate to everyone around the world, right? So I just hired a global head of community. I won't dox him, but he's definitely not based in the US. And he said to me, he's like, what are you offering? And I told him, and he was like shocked by it. Okay. And I told him, I said, I don't pay in market rates. I'm paying you what I would pay someone that I hired in San Francisco. Right. And what does that mean? It means, one, I now get someone who is loyal. I get someone who's incentivized. I get someone that knows that this is a golden opportunity that's probably not going to come around again, right? I think those are the two big things I call out. And then if I think about what are the key roles and why, I'll give you my top. So I think the first hire that you have to have is you have to have a community manager, right? Because a community manager is a little bit customer service, a little bit marketing, a little bit vibes. I think you have to understand also like how much work that is, right? Because you can't hire a community manager and go, okay, your job is to like answer Discord tickets and manage the Discord and fully program our channels with content. That's too much for one person, right? But I think finding a good community manager is important. I think finding the right balance of responsibilities is important. Where I think a lot of folks miss the mark is like they don't know how to hire the right community manager. And I'll give you the examples. When I'm at Arbitrum, I'm looking for folks that understand a lot of different things, right? Because I've got gaming projects, I've got finance projects, I've got infrastructure projects and things like that. So I need someone that can speak all those languages. So I need someone who's 360 crypto curious. So I'm not going to go hire an NFT guy. I'm not going to go hire a gaming guy. I'm going to hire, maybe a gaming guy that also understands all these things or he's interested in these things, right? Because he's got to be able to service a lot of different types of partners. Whereas it's funny because at Hashflow, I just hired my community manager, looking for a community manager for like about 5 months and got an insane amount of applications. And I said, what we need is very different than Arbiter. What we need is we need someone that really understands DeFi and really understands trading and really understands finance, because
Right.
we need someone that can not only answer kind of Discord questions and things like that and hype up the community on Twitter, but I'm like, if they're going to create content on Twitter, I need someone that can write thoughtful content about DeFi or Hashflow.
Yep.
If they're going to answer questions on Discord, I need someone that actively trades, that understands, like that context. And I think that stuff's hard to teach. I think like someone that's, and by the way, it doesn't matter if they come from a project, like it could be someone that works in Web2 that's just super passionate about crypto, that's been an active DeFi trader for 3 years. Like that person might be a much better community manager than someone coming from a blockchain. So not to spill the beans, but like our new community manager is a top 20 shot caller on Twitter. Nice. One of the co-founders of one of the best alpha trading groups on Twitter. And so I just feel very lucky to have this guy. And I also understand like how much positive impact he's going to bring to like our community, our existing members, all of that. So I think just really understanding like what type of community manager do you need, where to find them, what knowledge base they have, all of that's like very important. So that's like hiring a community manager. The second one that I think is really important is, I wouldn't even call it like a social media person. I'd call it like a content marketer. You have what I call normie channels. So normie channels are LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right? These are channels where your content is being shown to a normie audience. That's a very specific audience, right? Then you have what are called your native channels. So Discord, CT, Telegram, maybe even newsletter to some extent, right? These are native audiences, very different audiences where you have to market differently to both of them, right? So the reason you need a content marketer is because there's a couple things you need to do. One is you need to identify like which channels make sense today and why. You don't need to be on every channel, right? So if you're a very native project and you're targeting builders, you want to be on CT, Discord, Telegram. Don't worry about Instagram, Facebook, all that, because every time you launch a new channel, you've got to program it, you've got to manage it. It's a lot of work, right? I always say really limit your channels to what matters and why. I do think people sleep on email. I think newsletters are incredibly important because you own that audience and you can also convert that audience into other audiences a lot more easily. So a content marketer. So the reason you want a good content marketer is you want someone that understands the different channels, how to program on those channels as platforms, audience behavior on those channels and how it differs, et cetera, right? And like my person, for example, who I worked with at Amazon, she's incredible. She knows how to do this stuff in her sleep. She's never worked in crypto before. She comes from fashion and big tech and all that. I couldn't care less because she understands what should we do on Twitter? What should we do on Discord? What should we do on Telegram and why? And then she's also always looking for ways to optimize and scale and replicate and all that, which again is huge, right? So I think finding like a good content marketer is definitely an important hire. I wouldn't even care that they come from crypto. Where do you find a good content marketer? It is hard to find. I've got 2 good ones in my giant Rolodex. They don't come from marketing.
This is wild because so many people try to do it.
Yeah, like most content marketers, I'm not going to lie. Like when someone tells me they're a content marketing expert or a growth marketing expert, I usually have my BS detector go off because I think swing hard in both. And I really understand those worlds. And there's also different definitions for these things too. And so I actually have tests that I do when I'm interviewing, just like situational based tests. And I ask them questions and things like that. And I can tell in 2 seconds, like who is and who isn't. But again, I'm leaning on my knowledge base that I have, right? Where do good content marketers come from? They don't come from marketing. They don't come from brands. They come from media companies, right? And if you think about this industry, which again is built on digital and social, where would I find a good content marketer? You'd find them at places like BuzzFeed, Tastemade, Now This, but you're looking for people that have basically programmed social channels similar to television networks for 5 to 10 years, right? Most of those folks, media is collapsing. They're looking for new jobs. You're going to reach out to them. They're going to go, I know nothing about crypto. They might say, crypto's dangerous. No, it's not. Spend time with them, educate them, tell them, listen, we understand you have this skill set and knowledge base that we don't have. We understand that we have a skill set and knowledge base that you don't have.
Yeah, right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to join hands. And for 6 months, you're going to learn crypto and we're going to teach you, right? Yep. And then you're going to do what you do for cooking content, news content, whatever it is, for crypto, right? And so there are definitely people out there. And I would say the sweet spot for most of these folks, they're around like 30 years old, right? Because they've been in that space for 5 to 10 years. But a lot of these folks, I'll be honest with you, like media is not a super high paying industry unless you're at the top. So a lot of these folks are approachable, they're gettable.
Okay.
And another great place to look is if you go on like Snapchat, for example. Snapchat was trying to program like a television network. You see these things called Snapchat stories, and there's different ones. There's like Science Wow and Hood Stories and all these things. But same thing, if you can find someone that worked at a contextually relevant content, that's great, but you're probably not going to find that. But
Sure.
again, someone that understands these platforms and how to create content for them and how to optimize the algorithms, like that's probably your most important hire. And that person, by the way, could very much evolve into a CMO if it's the right person.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. If they've been crushing it 5 or 10 years in media and now you bring them on, educate them and set them off with that next loop for sure.
And then the last thing I would say is also don't forget how many resources are at your fingertips. Like I'll give you some examples. Midjourney, yes, a prompt engineer is expensive. There's websites where there's ready-made prompts that you can buy, plug them in, tweak them, and create great content. And that takes 2 seconds.
Nice.
Or
Yeah,
I'll give you an
that's a good
example. I did a funny kind of Halloween-based Twitter space this morning, Spooky Stories with Colonel Saunders. I literally went into ChatGPT yesterday. I wrote, tell me a Halloween story that intertwines the decentralized exchange crypto narrative.
Yep.
It pumped out like 3 stories for me. I changed some names. I added some funny tidbits to them. And I did all that in 15 minutes, right? So again, like I think people think, oh, I need a designer, or oh, I need a copywriter, all these things. Like, yeah, maybe down the road, but there's AI. AI solves for all this stuff. There's a great website, by the way, called There's an AI for That. And it's really like a repository of every AI tool you could think of. But even, I'll give you an example. You can take your Twitter data, export it, import it into ChatGPT Pro, and ask it to draw trends and generalizations for you. And by the way, if you don't have money to hire an Amazon data scientist, like there's some good stuff that comes out of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, get you 80% of the wall, and you can do that now on your own without the CMO, without the data team, et cetera. So yeah, no, super smart. I think that's all great advice. And across the board, what I'm hearing, I'll try to distill is there's certain roles that you need to hire that need to have that expertise. Like the community manager needs to be in the community, but your content manager doesn't. If you can find 2 good ones, put them together. And obviously you have your expertise as the founder that you're going to be helping that content manager. You can help them get caught up. So
and also, by the way, don't forget, there's 2 things I would say. One, don't forget to hire from your community. Like I'm a big advocate of try to find people in my community because it's like they already love the product, they live the product, they're
already a part of it on purpose.
Yeah, so like my global head of community was a community member at Arbitrum. Like when I was at Arbitrum, the new head of foundation community, Eli, shout out to Eli, I love that guy. He was a community member because I was like, number one, I shouldn't discredit these people because they're coming to me from Twitter. And then when I interview them, I look at their resumes. Again, I'm not looking at where'd you go to college, what blue chips did you work for? I'm looking at what tangible experience do you have that's going to resonate with this? Like I'm looking for soft skills and I'm looking for like passion and things like that. And to date, like all my from the community hires have been incredible. All of them have. Yeah. And then the other thing I would just
selected already is awesome.
Yeah. The other thing I would just say is also don't forget not everything needs to be in-house. What I mean by that is I have companies that I'm advising, like they're picking my brain for marketing strategy. Like they're basically getting free marketing strategy. But same thing, let's say you're like, man, we should be running paid advertisements. Like we don't understand media buying, media planning, rate cards, any of this stuff. Go find an advisor or go on LinkedIn and ask someone if they're willing to spend 3 hours with you for X amount of money. But it's like, there's a lot of great talent out there that is willing to do things, even like design. Like I've said this to other folks, do not go on Fiverr to do your design. Create a community-based challenge. There's great artists in crypto, or you know what? Go on LinkedIn, find a junior designer at Wieden and Kennedy, and ask them if they want to do a side project. They're probably going to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Realm just did a thing with Spired Out and had people submit artwork and storylines and everything else. There's cool. Things. Yeah, cool stuff coming in, no doubt. Yeah, farm your audience and that's like. They want to be a part of it, right? Like people are excited. If you throw a prize out there, even better, but people just want to be a part of it. If they already like your game, they like your community, if they're raising their hands and they want to participate, just give them ways to do it. I think
you also just never know who these people are because of the anon culture. But I've had situations where I've reached out to people and I'm like, oh, you're like a designer for a huge ad agency. You're doing my
that
doing
just
my
happens to play this
stickers
crypto
for me,
game.
and they're like, "Yeah, I love crypto," and you're like,
Yeah,
like you're on
I've met some
rotation.
interesting folks in this world, no doubt, and awesome stuff. I think all super actionable. I think let's give it a few listens, I'd say, if you're a founder and you're trying to sort this stuff out, because there's a lot of detail there, a lot of nuance, but that's really good advice, stuff that you can put into play right now. And then when you get a little further along, rewind the beginning of the episode and start to learn how to scale it. So you got a whole plan here in reverse. Andrew, this has been awesome. It's been really great to get to know you a bit online. Spend time with you today was even better. I appreciate it, and I know the listeners will as well. You bring a lot of joy to a lot of people, I'd say, out there in the crypto space. So you're doing a great job.
They bring a lot of joy to me. I have to say, it's every day I wake up, I'm excited to be here. I genuinely love a lot of these guys, brothers and sisters now, but it's a special industry. And I think, again, if you choose to be in this industry, do it for the right reasons, embrace the ethos of it, because again, even in a bear market, it is hard for me to be down, you know?
Yeah, right on. And on the way out here, obviously, Hashflow, Hashverse, everybody needs to go check those things out. Where do you want to point people to? Twitter, Discord?
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Websites?
Sure. If you want to follow along, so on Twitter, at Hashflow, that's our DEX. At Hashverse, that's the new GameFi project that we talked about. I'm at Andrew Saunders, but you'll probably see Colonel Sanders and Ryan Reynolds memes quite a bit. And then other than that, we have a Discord channel, obviously Hashflow. There's a Smack Talk section that's been added that's very Hashverse oriented, so good alpha and things there. And then the one that I think most folks actually sleep on is on our website, hashflow.com, we have the Hash Beats, which is our newsletter. And we do oftentimes actually release things there before we put them on social. So you want to stay early or know when a drop is coming. That's usually the best place to find it. Yeah.
Very nice. All right. We'll link all that stuff up down below in the show notes. Again, awesome. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been great hanging out with you today, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Ready Layer 2. If you're an Arbitrum builder with a story to share, then hit me up on Twitter at GitSmall, GITSMOL. Learn more at gitsmall.com.